The movie kicks off with a pretty intense scene. A man is jogging through a forest at night. It's dark, quiet, and a little creepy. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a man with a knife attacks him. It's brutal, and the jogger doesn't make it. This sets the tone for the rest of the film, dark, mysterious, and full of twists. Fast forward a bit, and we meet Sharon. She's a woman who's clearly grieving. Because the man who was killed at the beginning of the movie was her husband. Yep, she's now a widow, and life hasn't been easy for her since his death. The movie shows her waking up one morning, going through the motions of her daily routine. She heads to her son Anthony's room to wake him up for school. Anthony is a teenager, and like his mom, he's trying to cope with the loss of his dad. After getting Anthony ready for school, Sharon heads to work. On her way, she runs into Detective Barnes. Now, here's an interesting detail: Sharon and Detective Barnes actually went to the same high school together. Small world, right? Detective Barnes is working on her husband's case, and he lets her know that the investigation is still ongoing. He promises they'll have answers soon, but Sharon is clearly frustrated. She just wants closure. Meanwhile, at school, Anthony is having a tough time. He's being bullied by a kid named Brent. Brent is your typical school bully, mean, aggressive, and always looking for trouble. But then, something unexpected happens. A boy named Dylan steps in and saves Anthony from Brent. Dylan is new to the school, and right from the start, he seems like a good guy. He's friendly, confident, and quickly becomes Anthony's protector. The next day, Dylan helps Anthony out again, but this time it's with a girl. Anthony has a crush on a girl named Megan, and Dylan introduces them to each other. Dylan even helps Anthony join the school football team, which is a big deal for Anthony. It's clear that Dylan is going out of his way to be a good friend to Anthony, and it's working. Anthony starts to come out of his shell a bit. But not everything is smooth sailing. Brent, the bully, tries to hurt Anthony again during football practice. This time, though, the coach steps in and punishes Brent for his behavior. Later, in the locker room, Anthony asks Dylan why he's being so nice to him. Dylan opens up and tells Anthony that he knows what it's like to lose a father. He shares that his own dad committed suicide 2 years ago. This moment creates a bond between the two boys, and Anthony starts to trust Dylan even more. After school, Dylan drives Anthony home. Sharon is a little worried because Anthony is late, but he explains that he had football tryouts. He also introduces Dylan to his mom and asks if he can organize a pool party that night. Sharon is thrilled. She's been worried about Anthony since his dad's death, and seeing him socialize and make friends is a huge relief for her. She invites Dylan to stay and help set up for the party. The pool party is a lot of fun. Anthony's friends are there, and everyone's having a good time. Sharon even brings out snacks for the kids. At one point, Dylan goes inside the house to use the bathroom. But instead of just going to the bathroom, he starts snooping around. He ends up in Sharon's room, going through her stuff. Sharon catches him, and Dylan apologizes, explaining that he was just curious. He also opens up to her about his dad's suicide, and Sharon feels sorry for him. She tries to comfort him, and the two share a moment. As the days go by, Dylan and Anthony grow even closer. Dylan starts training Anthony in football, helping him improve his skills. One day, Dylan skips school and visits a house that Sharon is selling. He tells her he's there as a representative for his uncle. As Sharon shows him around, Dylan asks why the owners would want to sell such a nice house. Sharon reveals that the house actually belongs to her and Anthony. Her late husband had bought it for them, but now they're selling it. Things take a strange turn one morning when Sharon wakes up and finds Dylan already in her kitchen, waiting for Anthony. She's startled and covers herself, but Dylan apologizes and offers to wait outside. Sharon tells him it's fine and that she wasn't expecting anyone that early. She also thanks him for everything he's done for Anthony. Dylan hugs her, and the two share a moment before leaving for school. At school, Dylan encourages Anthony to ask Megan out on a date. Anthony finally works up the courage, and Megan says yes. That night, Dylan lends Anthony his car so he can take Megan out. While Anthony is on his date, Dylan stays at the house with Sharon. The two of them start talking about their lives and the struggles they've been through. It's a deep conversation, and you can feel the tension between them. After their talk, Sharon goes to take a bath. But Dylan can't resist her. He follows her into the bathroom, takes off his clothes, and joins her. Sharon is shocked but doesn't stop him. This is where their affair begins. It's a major turning point in the movie, and it changes everything. When Anthony comes home from his date, Dylan leaves. But really interesting. We finally get a glimpse of Dylan's house, and it's not what you'd expect. It's run down and messy, nothing like the image he's been projecting. It turns out that Dylan hasn't been honest about who he is. He's been pretending to be someone he's not, and his friendship with Anthony wasn't just out of kindness. There's something more going on. The next day at school, Dylan asks Anthony to lie for him. He tells Anthony to cut himself and then go to the football field with blood on his arm. Anthony does as he's told and punches Brent, claiming that Brent cut him. The coach takes this seriously, and Detective Barnes is called in. Sharon is also informed and rushes to the school. Dylan lies, saying that Brent tried to stab him and has been threatening Anthony all year. As a result, Brent gets suspended, and Anthony goes home with Sharon. Anthony and his mom, Sharon, had just returned home after the whole incident at school involving Brent, Dylan, and Detective Barnes. But as soon as they get home, Anthony and Sharon get into a huge fight. Anthony is furious about everything that's been happening, and he lashes out at his mom. He tells her that she never really loved his dad and storms out of the house. That's a pretty heavy accusation, and you can tell it hits Sharon hard. After Anthony leaves, Sharon gets a text from Dylan. He says he wants to see the property she's selling again and he wants to meet her that night. Sharon, still feeling emotional and vulnerable, agrees to meet him. She heads to the property, and sure enough, Dylan is waiting for her. The two start talking, and things quickly escalate. Dylan moves closer to her, and before you know it, they're kissing. It's a passionate moment, but it's also super risky because someone secretly records them on camera. After their romantic encounter, Sharon and Dylan spend the night together at the house. The next morning, Anthony wakes up and realizes his mom isn't home. He has no idea where she is, and he starts to worry. Meanwhile, we see Sharon and Dylan waking up in bed together. Sharon gets dressed, and just as she's about to leave, the doorbell rings. She wakes Dylan up and rushes downstairs to answer the door. It's Katie, Sharon's secretary. Katie, because the house is supposed to be shown to potential buyers that day, it's an open house. Sharon had completely forgotten about it, and Katie is surprised to see her there so early, especially since Sharon doesn't live there anymore. Sharon panics. She's scared that Katie might find Dylan upstairs, so she quickly comes up with an excuse. She tells Katie that she slept over because she had a fight with Anthony. Luckily for Sharon, by the time Katie goes upstairs to check the master bedroom, Dylan is already gone. But he accidentally left his sock behind, and Katie finds it. She doesn't think much of it, though. She just assumes Sharon had a date and doesn't want to pry. Phew, close call. Meanwhile, at school, things are about to get even more complicated. Megan shows Anthony a video she found online. It's the recording of his mom kissing Dylan. Megan tries to warn Anthony, telling him that Dylan isn't who he claims to be. She's shocked when Anthony doesn't seem surprised. He calmly tells Megan that this isn't the first time his mom has had an affair. Megan then reveals something even more shocking. Dylan called her last night and asked her to meet him at the house. She's confused about why Dylan would want her to see his affair with Sharon. Something fishy is definitely going on. Later that day, Dylan meets up with Megan. He takes her phone, forwards the video to his own phone, and posts it online. The video goes viral, and it completely ruins the open house. Potential buyers see the scandalous video, and the whole event turns into a disaster. Sharon is mortified, and Anthony is furious. Anthony then gets a text from Megan's number, asking him to meet her at a specific address. When he gets there, Dylan ambushes him from behind and knocks him out. Sharon, meanwhile, is trying to get in touch with Anthony, but he's not responding. She starts to panic. Then, she gets a message from Dylan, asking her to meet him. Before leaving, Sharon contacts Detective Barnes and asks him to meet her at the location. When Sharon arrives, Dylan is waiting for her. He starts explaining everything, and it's a lot to take in. Dylan reveals that he blames Sharon for his father's death. Turns out, Sharon had an affair with Dylan's dad, and when the affair was exposed, Dylan's father committed suicide. Dylan also admits that he killed Sharon's husband as part of his revenge plan. He hands Sharon a knife and tells her to commit suicide, threatening to kill Anthony if she doesn't. This is some seriously dark stuff. But Sharon isn't about to give up that easily. Instead of following Dylan's orders, she stabs the knife into his leg and makes a run for it. Just then, Detective Barnes shows up. Sharon tells him everything, and Barnes goes inside to look for Dylan. But Dylan is gone, he's already escaped. The two then head to Dylan's house to rescue Anthony. When they arrive at Dylan's house, they realize he's taken Anthony to the woods. Meanwhile, in the forest, Anthony is tied to a tree along with Megan. The two manage to free themselves, but they're still in danger. Sharon and Barnes rush into the woods to find them, but Barnes can't keep up with Sharon and falls behind. Suddenly, Dylan appears and attacks Barnes with a knife, knocking him out. Dylan then takes Barnes' gun and goes after Sharon. Dylan finally catches up to Sharon and points the gun at her. Anthony sees this and rushes to his mom's side. He tries to reason with Dylan, begging him not to do anything stupid, but Dylan is too far gone. Just as he's about to shoot, Megan sneaks up from behind and attacks him. Sharon grabs the gun and knocks Dylan out by hitting him with it. She then points the gun at Dylan, ready to kill him, but Anthony stops her. He begs her not to do it, and the screen cuts to black. The movie then jumps forward in time. We see that Sharon is now dating Detective Barnes, and her relationship with Anthony has improved. They've managed to move on from the trauma, and things are finally looking up for them. The movie ends on a hopeful note, with the family finding happiness again.